Ladies and gentlemen, here it is, the MSI GT75 Titan 8SG. This is a review unit on loan to me from HID Evolution. HID Evolution specializes in a lot of custom mods, and this thing is packing liquid metal on both the CPU, GPU, some of the best thermal pads out on the market, as well as a bottom panel mod. This is not only one of the fastest gaming laptops ever built, but the thermal performance thanks to HID is legendary. Inside this 17-inch, 10.5-pound behemoth is the RTX 2080 on an MXM module. That's right, you can replace this with another MXM graphics card later on down the road. It's also packing one of the fastest CPUs you can put inside of a laptop, the i9-8950HK. Currently, the base price on this bad boy is $3,800. We were able to get a nice healthy overclock of 4.7, keep it nice and cool, and you're going to see that in this video as well. This one came spec to me with a single M.2 NVMe 256GB hard drive. There's 4 DIMM slots in total on here. 2 of them are occupied with 8 gigs in each slot, DDR4 at 2666. Now, sometime in 2019, we are going to see 32GB DIMM slots, so you will be able to eventually max this out with 128GB of DDR4. Keep in mind, when you occupy all 4 slots, the base speed of 2666 does tend to drop down to 2400. These laptops are very popular in the enthusiast community, and that might be able to be modified later on down the road, only time will tell. Now, your standard Titan featuring an i7 will have a single 330-watt power supply, but not on the i9 model. You will have a splitter as well as 2 230-watt power supply units. This thing is no joke. Over on your left, you will have some instruction manuals, as well as the ICC color profile straight from HID Evolution themselves. I really appreciate this level of effort. And then on the right-hand side, just your standard cords will plug into the power supply and into your wall. Now, MSI's gaming laptops have never been known to have the most amazing box presentations. However, their packaging and foam materials are top-notch. You are in for a treat. This Titan is absolutely bonkers thanks to the mods from HID. Alright, let's move on to the I/O. At its thickest point, this beast stands 2¼ inches tall. Ports on the back, we have the LAN, mini display port, Thunderbolt 3 port, a 4K 60Hz HDMI, and the proprietary power plug. On the left, we have 3 3.1 USB ports, a mic in, a headphone out, a line in, and a line out. And over on the right-hand side, we have 2 more USB 3.1 ports and an SD card reader. On top of the aluminum deck is a plastic palm rest, does a great job of keeping your hands cool, and that per key RGB mechanical keyboard with about 2.4 millimeters of travel. Now, when it comes to airflow, the bottom of the Titan is not stingy. Most of that is ventilation, but the 2 holes on the left and right up top there, well, that's a panel mod done by HID themselves. It performs so well, it's almost common sense to have it. And their craftsmanship here was fantastic. It looks factory. Titans with unlocked CPUs usually have a pretty decent BIOS from the factory, so let's take a look. Not bad, we have a few decent things in here. I particularly enjoy being able to disable hyper-threading just for fun. Plus or minus on the keyboard will allow us to adjust things like CPU frequency, voltage offsets, and things like that. I really wish you could undervolt in the BIOS, however. I like to see memory profiles in here. Perhaps there's hope to get something faster than 2666. Minus the overclocking, I would really like to see all of these features standardized inside of gaming laptops. The Titan could easily be opened up with one hand. It comes to life very rapidly. The mechanical keys, with their long travel, have a nice clickety-clack sound to them. The keyboard never exceeded 31 degrees Celsius. The buttons on our right-hand side, starting from the top, is the power for the on and off. We have the MSI Dragon Center button, a bunch of utilities in there, pretty basic stuff. We've been looking at this for a very long time. It doesn't seem to be too bloaty, believe it or not. The button below that will allow us to max out our fans. Running at 60 decibels, it will sound just like this. The button below that is a programmable macro button, and the very bottom button allows you to change the RGB of the SteelSeries keyboard. This has about 8 or 9 different program features, and of course within the software itself, you can change this per key to your heart's content. Things we've seen once, we've seen it 1,000 times. The trackpad uses Windows Precision. It is smooth as glass. The buttons have their own RGB, and of course you can change the colors of those as well. They do feel a little springy and have a great deal of travel, but when I find that the keyboards and trackpads and buttons, very subjective. What I might like, you might not. This is a G-Sync panel, Full HD, 144 Hz, and the part number is AU0329D. Color calibration comes in at around 97% standard RGB, 71% NTSC, 75% Adobe RGB, at 358 nits of brightness. The webcam and microphone is located appropriately at the very top. That is a Full HD 30 FPS camera, and it looks and sounds just like this. The built-in webcam is actually 1080p at 30 FPS. It is located at the top of the bezel where it should be. Built-in microphone sounds just like this. The chassis is very quiet, but the keyboard is clickety-clack, so have a listen. Maximum fan curve on here will get up to 60 decibels, but when you activate it, even during a Skype call, it's not that bad. Now later on in the video, you're going to see thermal testing. All of it's going to be done at maximum fan, and I mean all of it. But I just wanted to show you briefly what you can do as far as tunability with this particular chassis acoustically. There is a ton of little sliders in here that you can move up and down, CPU, GPU. It works very well, much like the MSI fan curve did on desktop GPUs. This works remarkably well on here, and so you can get a great depth of acoustic tunability. The reason why those results are not showcased is because sky is the absolute limit, depending on what title you play, depending on what your perceived decibels are, depending on your ambient temperature. I could literally make a video about this and it would be 2 days long trying to cover all of these games and acoustics and thermals based on every single individual fan setting. Just know this, as loud as this laptop gets is 60 decibels, and we have quite a bit of wiggle room here due to the components that are inside and what HID did to them to keep them cool. The GT75 Titan's audio will punish your ears. We have 2 3-watt speakers and a 5-watt subwoofer. You've been warned in 3, 2, 1. The 90-watt-hour battery was good for around 3 to 4 hours unplugged, as long as you paid respect to your RGB lighting, kept your brightness down to around 40%, and set your power mode to best battery. For storage, we have 5 M.2 slots, 3 of which are underneath this heatsink. According to the spec page, we have 1 of which is a 2-lane NVMe, 2 of which that are combo, and 2 of which that will support NVMe for Intel devices only, perhaps Optane. Buried underneath that will be the single 2.5-inch drive. Look at that, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Wow. The network interface card is the 9260 featuring the killer 1550 software installed. Memory DIMM slots 2 and 4 here are empty, 1 and 3 are on the other side of the motherboard, and they feature Samsung DIMMs. One of the many great things about the Titan chassis is it does feature the MXM GPU module, meaning this is a slotted GPU. We can actually remove this and replace it with something better should it come along. Underneath all these glorious heat pipes is the i9 8950HK. We have a foam barrier on the PCB right here, and that'll help protect any liquid metal from spilling out should it occur. HID does an outstanding job with their liquid metal applications. It's a wonderful thing when you can buy a laptop from a company that will put liquid metal on for you and warranty it. And with an i9 inside of any laptop, in my opinion, it's necessary. Once again, let's not forget that other contributing factor, that panel mod. HID has cut 2 gigantic circles, put some mesh on there. Honestly, very hard to distinguish this from factory. Their craftsmanship here was spot on. I really like what I see under here. But let's be honest, the i9 is nearly impossible to cool. And now that we have the fastest GPU we can get inside of a laptop, well, let's just put it this way. The last generation of this, which is exactly what we have here, but with a 1080, we were getting CPU temperatures with overclocking and undervolting between 90 and 99 degrees Celsius, and the GPU was easily hitting the 80s. So is this thermally efficient, or is it hot garbage? HID, let's see how you did. Starting off with the GPU, the RTX 2080 MXM module inside of this Titan is designed to thermal throttle at 87 degrees Celsius. So let's see how this pans out. For 100% of our thermal and performance testing on the GT75, we will be using the maximum fan speed, as well as ultra settings, and 100% resolution scaling at 1080p. The two clips before you, our DX12 Ray Tracing is maxed out. Now you'll notice it does not appear to be very smooth. Recording DX12 at this time has been a little flaky, but I assure you, in-game, it was playing remarkably well. However, you'll notice the clip on the left getting almost double the frame rate as the clip on the right. Even though everything is set identically, testing two different maps can really show a great frame rate differential here, especially the one on the right is showcasing more of ray tracing's features. Just something we need to be aware of moving forward. At this time, the laptop is running completely stock. The i9-8950HK is running all 12 threads at 4.3 GHz, pulling wattage between 80 and 90. The RTX 2080 is showing limitation reasons of power, but do not worry, my friends, I'm going to show you exactly what I did to fix that in today's video. Personally, I like to run the game without ray tracing, moving back to DX11, everything on Ultra, and now we're going to average around 100 FPS. But here you will notice that the GPU utilization will be around 80%. You see at 1080p, that is kind of a big bottleneck here, and these RTX cards really tend to stretch their legs against the 10 series Pascal at 2K and 4K resolutions. Fortunately, we can overclock that CPU and sort of saturate that GPU a little bit better with the faster core speed. Now in these two clips, we have the CPU overclocked to 4.7 GHz. The clip on the left is actually being undervolted with the throttle stop tweaks, -0.125 on the core and cache, nothing else is done. The clip on the right is using the factory voltage, and you will see we are running into a power or current limit throttling. What's happening is that once we get around 100 watts under this gaming load, the CPU is now throttling itself back down to 4.5 and it's bouncing back and forth. So it's going to be crucial. In order for you to get the most out of this machine, you will not only, of course, overclock the CPU, but then undervolt the CPU as well. After many hours of testing, Fraps revealed that the overclock to 4.7 was worth an average of around 20 FPS. And here we are running the works. We have overclocked the i9 to 4.7, we have now undervolted the core and cache, -0.125, and now to eliminate the power limit throttling that the RTX 2080 was having, we need to lower the voltage using MSI Voltage Curve Editor. The factory voltage on the RTX 2080 is right around 1.05. I had lowered that down to 0.9 and kept the frequency at just barely below 1900 MHz. Pushing this harder in either direction would cause artifacting. Your mileage may vary. Surprisingly enough, the way that I enjoyed using this laptop the most was let everything run stock, but then undervolt the GPU and the CPU. Maximum temperatures on the GPU now never hit 60 degrees Celsius, and the CPU hung out around mid to upper 60s. This was a really fun quality of life. With these tweaks here, this is essentially the best version of stock, and according to Fraps and several hours worth of in-game testing, my average frame rate was about 105. But should you want more performance, it can be had thanks to HID Evolution's panel mod and liquid metal. We've got a little bit of wiggle room here to get that additional 10 or 20% performance, just by overclocking that CPU. Let's do some benchmarks. I've never had a GTX 1080 before, so I'm not too sure how much faster a 2080 is. But let's start off with Firestrike. At best, we scored around 26.6 after a little bit of MSI Voltage Curve Editor, and the frequency was just under 1900 MHz. TimeSpy scored around 10.5. Port Royale, apparently some ray tracing benchmark. Not too sure how this scales yet, as this seems to be pretty new across the board. 57.67. With the CPU in Cinebench. After we got that to 4.7, we scored just over 1500 on that. Pretty solid. Now when it came to games, Battlefield 5 in DX12 Ray Tracing, Ultra Everything, we have two different average frame rates. In the open map environments, we were averaging around 85 FPS, but in the real busy, hectic maps where there's a lot of ray tracing and geometry and stuff going on, let's say Rotterdam for example, average frame rate was around 50. Now in DX11, same thing now, open maps around 125 FPS, and within those closed, very busy and hectic high geometry type maps, average frame rate around 104. Overwatch average frame rate, this was of course Ultra Everything, 233 FPS. PUBG, we averaged around 130 FPS. Very impressive, and this is where that i9 really shines to help push some of that GPU performance out. Battlefield 1, a lot of the open maps there, we averaged around 155 FPS on all Ultra, and more busy type maps around 120 FPS. Now what impressed me the most was Black Ops 4. The multiplayer scored around 150, 160 on average, and the Blackout mode did as well. Again, this is where the i9 really shined. Now in my opinion, it seems that RTX 2080 is really bottlenecked by the resolution, and I find that if I had to take a guess, the performance of this really isn't too much better than a laptop 1080, and we do not get a whole lot of situations where I'm getting 99% GPU utilization unless I'm doing things within ray tracing and stuff like that. In other words, 1080p laptops with an RTX 2080, it's very difficult to really take advantage of what that GPU is fully capable of. It seems that even though we have an i9, if we had something even faster, that would help. So those interested in a 2080 and perhaps going with the i7 8750H, you're going to see even more of a bottleneck. You know what? I used to have one of these. It was the GT73 Titan, and it had the 6820HK overclockable i7 and a GTX 1070. And that was, at the time, I thought a perfect laptop for me. And as the channel goes on, I need to buy, sell, move on, grow the channel, cover more content, yada yada yada. But when I reflect back on it, that chassis was great for me, because it played games very well. It did not take up a lot of real estate. As you can see, I do not have a lot of depth on my desk. And all of my friends that I play with are in their 30s and 40s and even some into their 50s. And all of them have 17-inch desktop replacements, which is exactly what this is here. And then when we're not gaming, they just fold them up and stick them on the shelf, and then a lot of my buddies go back to using their MacBooks for their daily drivers. But when they game, they have this behemoth that they pull out of the shelf, set it on their desk, and go for it. And that may seem weird to you, okay? If you're a student, that's going to be a real head scratcher. But when you get older, you're prioritized, and the things that you consider, utility to you are going to change. Your taste buds for this stuff are just going to change. Now, that doesn't mean this will eventually suit you, but it does mean it does suit people out there. And it suited me great this whole entire week, and it suited me great 2 years ago when I used that chassis. But what's even more important about today's video is we got to see what RTX was capable of inside of a laptop in pretty much what's ultimately going to be the best case scenario. It was being pushed by the strongest CPU you're going to get inside of a laptop within a very small few out there that will be able to beat it. And the thermal efficiency in the Titan is fantastic, especially after HID was able to give it some love, as this thing is running incredibly cool right now. So we have the bar set very high, and let's see what happens when these other chassis get the neutered version of RTX in here, and let's see how that scales down. Thank you for joining me in this video. This machine is so awesome to use. It's absurd, but it is so freaking fun. That's going to do it for now. Hope you enjoyed this video. This is Bob of All Trades. Peace out.